In 1955, deep beneath the streets of Berlin, hundreds of American and British intelligence officers were digging a tunnel toward the heart of Soviet territory. They believed they had pulled off one of the greatest intelligence coups in history. What none of them knew was that the Soviets had been watching them dig from the very first day. The story begins in the early 1950s, at the height of the Cold War. Berlin was a divided city, a western island surrounded by Soviet-controlled East Germany. For Western intelligence agencies, it was also the most valuable listening post in the world. British intelligence had already pulled off something remarkable in Vienna, secretly tapping underground telephone cables used by Soviet forces. The operation was so successful that the CIA wanted to replicate it on a much larger scale, in Berlin, targeting cables used by top Soviet military command. The plan was audacious. Dig a tunnel nearly 500 meters long, starting from West Berlin, running underneath the border, and tapping directly into 3 critical Soviet communication cables buried in East German territory, all without the Soviets ever noticing. The CIA and British intelligence, MI6, agreed to run the operation jointly. It was given the codename Operation Gold. The engineering challenge alone was staggering. The tunnel needed to survive freezing winters, shifting soil, and constant risk of discovery, all within a few hundred meters of Soviet guards. Construction began in 1954, disguised as a radar installation on the American side of the border. Soil removed from the tunnel had to be secretly disposed of, truckload by truckload, so that no unusual mounds of earth would give away what was happening underground. For nearly a year, engineers dug through freezing, waterlogged soil, working in near total silence to avoid detection from above. Every sound had to be muffled. Every risk had to be managed. The tension of discovery hung over the operation constantly. In February 1955, the tunnel was finally completed. Technicians successfully tapped into the Soviet cables. Recording equipment began capturing an overwhelming flood of intercepted communications, military orders, troop movements, and diplomatic exchanges, all flowing directly into American and British hands. For the next 11 months, Operation Gold produced an almost unimaginable volume of intelligence. Every day, reels of recorded tape were rushed back to Washington and London for transcription and translation. It seemed like the greatest intelligence success of the entire Cold War, but there was a problem no one on the operation knew about. Before construction had even begun, a British intelligence officer involved in the planning stages had already betrayed the entire operation to the Soviets. His name was George Blake, a senior MI6 officer who had secretly become a Soviet double agent years earlier, after being captured and turned during the Korean War. Blake had access to nearly every detail of Operation Gold from its earliest planning meetings. Blake passed the entire plan to his Soviet handlers before a single shovel touched the ground. The Soviets knew about the tunnel's location, its purpose, and its timeline, all before construction even started. This left Soviet intelligence with an extraordinary dilemma. If they shut down the tunnel immediately, they would expose the fact that they had a mole deep inside British intelligence, putting Blake and future operations at serious risk. Instead, the Soviets made a calculated decision. They would let the tunnel operate, but they would feed carefully controlled and partially false information through the tapped cables, protecting their most sensitive secrets, while allowing the West to believe they were winning. For nearly a year, American and British analysts pored over thousands of hours of intercepted communications, unaware that some of what they were hearing may have been deliberately shaped to mislead them, while genuinely sensitive material was rerouted elsewhere. In April 1956, the operation came to an abrupt end. Soviet forces, in a move staged to look like a routine maintenance discovery, found the tunnel and exposed it publicly, turning it into a propaganda embarrassment for the West. Soviet officials brought journalists to the site, showcasing the tunnel as proof of American espionage aggression. Western intelligence agencies were humiliated in the press, having no idea that the greater betrayal had happened years earlier from within their own ranks. It would take another 6 years before George Blake's betrayal was finally uncovered, after a defector revealed his identity to Western intelligence. Blake was arrested in 1961, convicted, and sentenced to 42 years in prison, one of the longest sentences ever handed down in British legal history. In a final twist, Blake escaped from prison in 1966 with help from fellow inmates, fled to the Soviet Union, and lived out the rest of his life in Moscow, celebrated as a hero of Soviet intelligence until his death in 2020. Operation Gold is remembered today as one of the strangest paradoxes of Cold War espionage, a mission that was simultaneously one of the greatest engineering achievements in intelligence history and one of its most complete betrayals, compromised before it had even truly begun. It stands as a reminder that in the world of espionage, even the most brilliant operation can be undone by a single person no one suspected.